Well, hello, St. Thomas. I'm here. This is Gar. Of course, hopefully you know me. And I'm here with our senior warden, George, and we are remotely connected through the power of the computer. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about some things that are happening at St. Thomas and plans for the fall, and also where we are in terms of in-person worship and some new criteria that we've come up with to kind of help us guide that. So I'm going to hand this over to George, let him dive in with that stuff. So.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's great to be connecting with everyone again, and we can't wait for a time when we can all get back in person and see each other and share the peace in the way that we're all used to. But for now, this seems to be working pretty well, and we thank you for taking the time to listen to some of the information we want to share. So we're trying to be consistent. We're trying to continue to manage how we think about meeting in person. And we want to really be as objective as we can. We want to continue to promote safety. We really want to make sure we don't increase the risk for any of our parishioners, but we also don't want to be subjective. So we're really trying to use as much data as we really can to help us guide our decision making. And one of the articles that Gar and I have come across talks about the use of two fairly easy to calculate metrics, if you will, that measure the risk of COVID-19 in the community. And so real briefly, those two things are what they call the test positivity rate. You may have heard about that on the news. And the other is the case rate, and that would be the number of cases in a population per 100,000 people. So we are able to pull data from the Johnson County website, it's publicly available, to allow us to track those numbers. The test positivity rate, that's simply percent of all the tests that are done, what percentage of them are positive. And the public health experts tell us that if that number gets above 10% in a community, then the virus is really getting to a dangerous level. And we want to keep that number as low as possible. The other number, the case rate per 100,000, we are told that if that number is above 100 cases per 100,000, we also need to be concerned. And so we want to keep that number down as well. Now, the common question is, how does testing, because we've ramped up testing, how does testing affect those two numbers? Well, if you start testing a lot of people, just bringing in more people to test, you expect the case rate to go up because you're going to catch more people. But you're also going to be catching more people that you're testing who will be negative. And so your positivity rate should come down. So they kind of be like a seesaw. If you were to then start to really be selective in your testing, really only testing people because of symptoms, your case positivity rate would go back up. But your cases per 100,000 would likely come back down because you're going to miss some. You're going to miss people with milder symptoms or people who are asymptomatic. So they really kind of act like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. But when they start going up together, now you're really worried in your community because now that's the burden of the virus. And if they start coming down together, that means everybody's done a really good job of physical distancing and wearing your masks and washing your hands and doing all that great stuff. So it's 10% on the positivity rate and 100 cases per 100,000 people on the case rate. And right now in Johnson County, that 10% number, we're at 9.7%. And the 100 cases per 100,000 people, we are at 91. So we are very close to those magic numbers, if you will, which is not great. And those numbers have been fairly steady for the last 3 to 4 weeks. And if anything, they're actually inching up. They're getting closer to those positive numbers. So what we've decided to do, in accordance with the vestry for oversight, is that if those numbers reach that 10% and 100 case rate for 2 consecutive weeks, and we're measuring them in week-long blocks so that you get a smooth average, then we will really scale back and significantly limit our in-person operations, particularly anything that we might have even started to consider to do in the building. We would really scale back because we have to put everyone's health and safety first. And those numbers are a real countywide population set of numbers that look at the burden of disease. So that's a long-winded explanation, but it gives you a little bit of data, and it shows you we're really trying to be objective. We're not getting caught up in fear. We're not getting caught up in politics. We're really trying to use public health data and really hard and fast numbers that are supported by the science to help us know what we can do safely and what we can't.
So part of that is to help us decide when we can get back inside to do some worship in the sanctuary. We had hoped by about mid-July. Our intention was by mid-July to have some things happening inside the sanctuary and things like that. But we have held those plans for the time being because the rates are going up, and that's the riskiest behavior, because it's being in one room for a long time with a group of people doing things. And so even though we could social distance and wear masks, we just sort of felt like that's what we want to do. So that's why we focused on being outside for worship. We do have some people meeting inside the building, and so as we get closer to those numbers, we'll evaluate what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, or further restrictions or things like that. So we're not coming back inside primarily for worship right now. We'll continue our outside worship and try to keep our activities that are happening mostly outside, because that's really everything that science says is that's the safest environment. Social distancing, wearing a mask, being outside, doing all those things. And so far, we've not had a case where something has spread within St. Thomas. And so we can verify that because several of us have been tested just to make sure, and tests are coming back negative. We have had some members who've been tested positive, but they have not participated in any in-person activities. And so that kind of information is important. So if you have a situation, you become positive, you need to let us know. One, so we can reach out to you and support you during that time, but also on the off chance you came up for something, we can make sure to be part of the contact tracing and whatever we need to do to help keep people safe. So it's going to be a trying time, but we're doing the best we can to keep things safe. But also I loved the science. George sent me that article and I was like, this is really good, because it gives us an objective measurement instead of just sort of whose feeling is stronger. Because we all want to come together, but we also want to be safe to do that. So anything else about that, George?
I think that's really the key. And, we have had some, the small group worship opportunities. Youth group has met a couple of times. We've had a couple of our youth camps now that season is wrapping up for the summer. And we've done a really good job of keeping people safe and still having meaningful activities, albeit outdoors. And I know the weather hasn't been super cooperative with that over the last week or so. But so kudos to our staff, to Gar and the rest of the team for really maintaining that type of environment. And many thanks for all of you who chose to participate or have chosen to participate in any of those things so far. And then thanks to everyone who's continuing to offer prayers and join us for online worship. It's all part of being part of the St. Thomas family. So it's wonderful.
Our online worship will continue in a very robust manner. That will not change. And so we'll still have Compline 5 nights a week. You'll see some different leaders at that. So some vestry members and other people are going to start helping Kelly and I lead that. And you'll also see our 3 services on the weekend, 5:30, 8:45, and 10:45 will continue. We're continuing to kind of improve that. And so if you haven't watched it for a while, or you watched it several months ago and got frustrated because something didn't work, it's much more stable, and we've got some great offerings. Our musicians have been wonderful to do all kinds of creative things. Our lectors have been reading. People, trying to include as many people as possible. Our youth put together a little band all through Zoom and through video. And so some really great offerings. And if you can't come on the weekends, you can always go to the YouTube channel, and everything is sitting there. And so you can go back and you can nitpick my sermons and send letters to the bishop if you'd like. So just kidding. I want to let you guys know about a couple of things that we're going to focus on in the fall to kind of help us stay connected as a congregation. So one of them is we're going to work on neighborhood connections. If you're on Facebook, I posted something a couple days ago about where all the people that are part of St. Thomas live, little dots on a map, a little splatter graph. It's kind of cool to look at. But one thing we discovered, this is new with our database that lets us do that, we can make some neighborhood groups. We discovered there's a few people literally living next door to each other that didn't know or on the same block didn't know they were both coming to the same church because they went to different services or didn't meet. So we're going to do some work around having some small neighborhood groups, with the intention of, let's do a season of get to know your neighbor from St. Thomas, so you know that people are actually not far from you. Some of you who've been around St. Thomas for a while will remember something called Agape Groups. This will be fashioned a little different, but it's sort of the same vein. So, maybe 6 to 10 households will work on a way for you guys to connect with each other. You'll have a leader and not a whole lot of agenda other than to meet each other, hold each other in prayer, and do some mutual support as needed. So be looking for some information about that. That won't come until September. We're also going to do some work around other small groups, dinner groups, things like that, finding a new and different way for them to meet, and also starting some very targeted small groups that might have themes or interests or studies or things that people are doing, as well as some work on race reconciliation. So that committee will be drawing itself together here pretty soon, and we'll be doing some more work. Another thing, one of our best members, Laura Bond, mentioned, we're going to be making some yard signs. I'm sure you're seeing lots of political yard sign going up right now. These are not political, but they're going to have statements of faith and hope, and what are meant to be statements about drawing our community together and not division. And so we'll make those available to you. We probably ask you to give a little bit to have one just because of the cost. We'll make that minimal, but you'll have a yard sign you can put up that might say, love your neighbor. It might have a quote on scripture that's about unity. Sort of like our sign that says, love your neighbor. You love your neighbor who votes differently than you. Love your neighbor that, I can come up with a whole list. Love your neighbor who's a different religion. The purpose is to have some positive messages within the groups, within our neighborhoods and homes and other things. So look for some information about that. Give us the next couple of weeks. But those are some things we're going to do around connecting, in addition to, youth group will have its activities. Barb is working on some creative plans for children's ministry. All of our small groups continue to meet in different ways. And we've done lots of other things around this, trying to continue to maintain our robust community in very different ways. I'm really proud of our staff. I'm really proud of our investor. Our investor has been stellar in terms of supporting us and making sure things happen that need to happen. And also lots of lay volunteers who have really stepped up and been willing to be creative and just continuing to keep our community alive and faithful and connected. And so we're just doing the best we can to keep people safe and to not rush into something. The last thing I think any of us would want was for us to come together to worship God and then 30 of us walk out sick when we know the risk is there. And so, or for a minister to have that. So when you come to St. Thomas, what do we got to do, George?
You got to clean those hands first. You got to make sure you're wearing that mask, and you got to stay 6 feet apart.
That's right. So you got to do this. So I have my mask. So the staff, even when we're here, even though we're with each other all the time, we have our masks on unless we're in our private office. And we know that nobody else is around. And even then we have it right next to us. So if somebody needs it, we do that. So everybody's been really great about following those rules when they come to St. Thomas. And we really don't want to have to yell at folks. If you come up here and say, I forgot my mask, we have a bunch of masks for you. We have both paper masks and also cloth masks that several members of the church have been making. So we know there's lots of ways for you to get support. So the last thing I want to say is, if you haven't been up to the church, I encourage you to come by sometime and take a moment to pray and look at the gardens, or just come up here. Our junior warden, Bruce, and his wife, Peggy, have led a mighty band of people who have done a ton of work on our grounds, and it looks amazing. The gardens have always looked amazing, but they've helped us to kind of take it to the next level. And so I encourage you to stop by sometime. Our gardens are everything from a place where we care for those who've passed in our columbarium as their ashes are laid to rest, but also it's meant to be a symbol of prayer and also of God's beauty of creation. And it's a way of praising him in physical form in the gardens. And so they have really just done a lot of work, and I'm grateful to that. Our Tom's helpers are back and doing lots of work, and they have been wonderful about following the rules and doing all the things they need to do to social distance. And but we are being careful. And to circle back to the beginning of our call, if we need to adjust, we're going to adjust, and we're always going to rule on the side of safety. And that's just what we're going to have to do. So encourage your neighbors to wear masks, encourage your neighbors to do the things they got to do. And George, you want to say anything just as we kind of wrap up? I'm thinking parents right now who are sending their kids to college or deciding about school. Holy cow. And educators and teachers and our administrators, you work, your career is caring for children. Do you have anything to say, or you have your own kids,
Well, so many of you know I'm a pediatrician by training, and you also, many of you know my wife Robin, and our 3 kids. And so we are probably in the same boat as many of you. We're struggling through that decision of balancing, normal social life for teenagers and almost teenagers, and where's the best academic environment and where's the best place for them to be safe. And we're wrestling with all those same decisions. When I take off the parent hat and I put on the physician's hat, we're wrestling with trying to learn even more about this virus. What I would just encourage you to do is, try to find the most reputable sources, the places where you can really be the most confident in the information that you receive. Look for sources where it's not about the politics, but it's really about the science. And then pray. There will not be one right answer for everybody. Each individual, we have multiple school districts in this county, and each school district is going to handle it a little bit differently. For each family, there's a unique set of circumstances depending on what the risk factors are for your children or for you or for other extended family members. For some of our families, there may be factors of employment and other things that really directly tie into where your kids spend their day. I know I spend a lot more of my time where this is, front and center in my prayer life. And I just encourage you to continue to do the same. There is a peace that comes from gathering information and then trying to sit and be quiet with it and listen for someone to guide you in how to apply that information. And so I just encourage people to continue to do that. But based on what we know right now, it all comes down to, can you physically distance, can you wear a mask, and can you practice good hygiene? And those 3 things have not changed and likely will not change.
And I would say, even as a parent of, I have a high school student and a college student, and it's hard to make these decisions, but we have tried really hard to include our children in those conversations. That's one of the things I think that all of us, especially parents, need to pay attention to. Our kids have a lot of things they need to process, and so sometimes just sitting and listening to them is the best thing you can do. But also letting them articulate their own frustrations and fears. They haven't had enough life to really have a context for this. I don't know that any of us really have a context for this. And so we're all kind of trying to get through it. And I think what George said, I also thinking holding each other in gentle space and knowing that your family may make one choice and your close friends would make another, and then holding them and not judging them, but also supporting them in those decisions that they make. I think is really important right now. And I know we wanted to come back here 14 years ago with 2 little tiny children, knowing that the schools were some of the best in the country. And that was one of the things that brought us here. I know from having gotten 1 kid all the way through the public school system and now a second that's almost through, I can't think of a teacher that doesn't passionately care about their kids, or an administrator that doesn't passionately care about kids. These are their vocations and their ministries, and they may not call them that in the public schools, but they certainly are. And they're scared too, and they're nervous about it, and they want to keep those kids safe, and they're doing the best they can. So you can even encourage them. I know Kelly actually wrote all of the school teachers that we've had, and just giving them a note of encouragement in the midst of this, and not yelling at them. to do that. And if you're really frustrated, you're welcome to call Kelly or I or Barb. Any of us, we're all going to hold you in our prayers and happy to support you. We are looking at some ways. One of the things that Shawnee Mission School District is looking at is how can churches be places where families that decide to stay home, can they come and use the internet and things like that and keep social distance. And we're going to look, I know Barb is working on some ideas around that. A lot of it's going to depend on county numbers, but we certainly have lots of space here that could be set up, and we'll be very thoughtful about that. So just so you know, but there may be some ways for us to support families that decide not to send their kids back, but need space or just a different locale for some times. So some different things that we're going to try to do, but we're all holding in our prayers, and it's not an easy decision. And then you just got to be flexible at the same time. I think adaptability, if anything we've learned the last 6 months is we have to be adaptable, and, they may open schools and then we all find ourselves learning at home online again in a couple of weeks. We just may, I don't know what to say about that, but.
I think you hit it spot on, Gar. I mean, and whether it's because of the effect of everybody coming back to school, or whether it's the inevitable of influenza season and other viruses that come in the wintertime, everyone should have that mental flexibility to be prepared that there will likely, it would not be surprising to see changes again. We really hope not. And again, the more that you mask up and the more you keep your distance and the more you wash your hands and don't touch your face and everything, the better those chances are. But I think we just need to be prepared that things will, likely change again. And we just need to be ready for that.
So again, I want to thank the vestry, especially George and Bruce and others who've done a lot. And we've been meeting more often and checking in with each other and doing the things we need to do to lead this church and also be leaders in our community. We are blessed at St. Thomas with school board members, with city council members, with county commissioners, with all kinds of people who are doing hard work in the community. And so we'll just keep going. St. Thomas is never closed. We have remained open. We've shifted our model, and we're still shifting. And so I want you to know we're all trying to stay connected to you. You can always reach out to me. I think you guys get enough emails from me. You should know where to find me, or any of the other staff. Or if you have more questions, send us a note. I think that's it. George, you got anything else?
No, just everybody stay safe, and we'll keep everybody in our St. Thomas family in our prayers.
Thank you, George, so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. God bless.